that's what I need to do. And I contacted the program director of the local progressive talk station in Miami, and eventually he hired me to work on a new morning show. And I produced it. I was the producer, the news person, the promotion director, the sidekick, the fill-in host on a two-person show. And because this was Clear Channel, and they had 7 radio stations in this building and 2 AM stations. There was WIOD, which was the Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, conservative talk station, and they had a monster staff. And then there was little old us. 940 Wins, the progressive talk station, and I was the only live person who worked solely for that radio station. I did everything. Unfortunately, 2 years after I got there, a year after I started hosting the show, they pulled the plug on it and turned it into the 5th sports talk station in Miami. Because that's what we needed. But then I had been in touch with the people at Air America, and I started doing some fill-in work there. Eventually, I started hosting the late night show. And about a year after I started working with them, Air America went under. But during this time, I had started, listeners would say, we want to see you. And so I started doing a Ustream thing. I worked from my home studio. And I said, you know what? The day it went off was also the day of the Citizens United ruling, by the way. It was a very dark day in American history. And I just moved my show online. I already have my website. It's called radioornot.com. And it's radio or not, because it's radio, but it's not. And I do think that this is the future. It's, the audience is pretty big. There are so many different ways that you can get the show. I do it live Monday through Thursday mornings from 10 to noon Eastern. I use Tom Hartman's chat room, and I have a Ustream chat room, and I'm monitoring both during the show. And I've got a good, pretty nice and growing live audience. But it's also available via podcast. It's available from clicking on my website and listening to the player. There's a lot of ways to listen to it, and I think this is the way of the future. So that's my background. Now, joining me on the panel, I guess I'll go right down the line. Sam Cedar, you also know from Air America Radio, where he hosted, I think, 4 shows. Sam currently hosts a daily live radio show online and via podcast, The Majority Report. Majority.fm is the website. And he also is a co-host of the syndicated radio show Ring of Fire with Mike Papantonio. Plus, you see him on TV quite a bit. He's a frequent cable news guest and occasionally guest hosts Countdown for Keith Olbermann. We've got Cliff Schechter. Now, in addition to being a regular guest on my show, and Sam's show, and Tom's show, Cliff is a...
He's your friendships.
Yeah, he's a nationally syndicated columnist, a weekly contributor to Al Jazeera English. He's an author. The Real McCain was Cliff Schechter. And today he's going to make a really big announcement so that I'll be able to add Media Mogul to Cliff's introduction. Tom Hartman, you all know. Now, I love Tom, and Tom has embraced all facets of the media, old and new, and does it better than anybody I know. He's, of course, the host of the Tom Hartman radio program from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern on both commercial radio and public radio. And it's simulcast on the internet and on Free Speech TV. So he straddles all facets there. He also, after that, if that's not enough, hosts the nightly hour-long program, The Big Picture, syndicated by Free Speech TV and RT. And he's a New York Times bestselling author of something like 285 books, right?
23, I think it was.
Yes.
It's really actually not that far.
No, I know. And on the end is Tim Carr. Now, Tim Carr is the campaign director for Free Press. You can find him at freepress.net. It's a national not-for-profit media reform group. And Tim oversees all their campaigns and online outreach efforts, including SaveTheInternet.com. And Tim is my go-to guy for net neutrality. And a lot of people, we don't use very sexy terms on this side. Net neutrality, people don't know what it means. Tim's going to explain that to you and why it's so important, especially if this dream that, the internet is the future of radio and broadcasting really is going to happen. We need net neutrality, so we'll get into all that. So, Monday morning, Van Jones talked about how the Tea Party boasted 800 house parties and 50,000 people participating in drafting their contract from America, but that the American Dream movement is actually 2 to 3 times bigger, that this movement launched with almost 1,600 house parties, and 131,000 plus people participating in the contract for the American Dream. But the big difference, we had no money, and guess what? We got no media coverage. Katrina vanden Heuvel spoke. She talked about the 1,500 people who were arrested a couple of weeks ago in front of the White House protesting the Keystone XL pipeline, and nothing in the mainstream media. And then she asked, can you imagine if 1,500 Tea Partiers were arrested? Right?
Yeah.
It would be everywhere. I mean, I say often, you need just tens of people with tea bags hanging from their hats and misspelled signs, and it's a media circus. You know, we had hundreds of thousands of people out in the street in Wisconsin, and we saw nothing, right? We were able to watch this peaceful revolution in Egypt, thanks to Free Speech TV, and Al Jazeera, if you could get it on your cable system, but we didn't see what was happening in Madison, Wisconsin. Bernie Sanders yesterday was awesome, and he talked, you know, there are many more of us than there are of them. But you wouldn't know that if you watch the mainstream media, and I think the reason is because it's not the mainstream media, it's the corporate media.
That's right.